So I remember I used to struggle quite heavily with video games and with a video game addiction. I was going like 7 hours a day, and this was after I have been a gamer pretty much my whole life, but this was after I had dropped out of school, so I just had like all of this free time to just play games all day. I remember I really began to realize that video games were bad for me in June of 2022, which was a few months after I had dropped out of school. So, a few months after I had like this 4 month gaming session, I was just consuming all of this content about people telling me how video games were truly bad for me. And this was actually shortly after my gaming PC had broken down because I was playing so much. So, I was just sitting in my room watching YouTube, just consuming all of this content, and this was around the ages of 14. I just dropped out of ninth grade. I remember that I really did want to quit, and I really did try to quit. So I was just sitting in my room watching YouTube, consuming all of this content about how video games were bad for me. And this was when I was at the age of 14. So I just dropped out of ninth grade. I just dropped out of ninth grade a few months prior. And I did want to quit, right? I did have this intention deep inside of me that I wanted to quit, but I just couldn't get myself to quit. I just continued playing with this intention in the back of my mind that I needed to quit, like 6 months after learning that it was bad for me. 6 months after all of these influencers online telling me to stop because it was bad for me. Yeah, I remember that I really did want to quit, but I just couldn't get myself to quit. Right now, that was in 2022. Fast forward to 2026 now. I haven't played video games in 13 months, which is something that I'm quite proud of. Right? The thoughts and urges to play video games are very, very rare for me, right? I literally don't get any urges or thoughts in regard to it whatsoever. I have the power to resist urges when we have like guests over, and then they turn the PlayStation on, they start playing, and then they ask me, "You want to play?" And then I say no, right? I have that power to resist urges now. That power is something that I have been struggling to develop for years. And I just want to tell you the story of how I've actually been able to quit from being addicted for so long, from being addicted when I was playing like 7+ hours a day. I remember that I was just so mentally weak at that time, right? I was just feeding myself with all of this dopamine. I remember that I used to listen to music to I used to listen to music while playing video games to get like an even bigger dopamine spike. Right? I just get emotional over the smallest things. I'd have like no emotional strength compared to now. So yeah, I was told that it was bad for me at the beginning of June of 2022, and I still continued to play video games even though I knew they were bad for me. And I did this because I was just young, right? The negative consequences that you get from doing bad things when you're young just are not that big compared to when you're older, right? If I'm 18 now and I do something bad, it does have quite a profound impact on my life. Like, I see this in my younger brother. He has the luxury to play these video games in his free time without any negative consequences. If I'm just never going back to video games, right? Because I'm older now, I have more responsibilities. I just didn't have that many responsibilities when I was 14. I was still just a child, right? It didn't really matter what I did. It didn't really matter how hard I worked or how hard I didn't work or what bad habits I indulge in, right? They just didn't have a negative consequence on my life compared to now. But what has persisted all this time from the point of learning that video games are bad for me, from the point of June of 2022, was this voice in my head telling me to stop, right? I just had this faint echo in my mind while I played video games that I needed to stop, but I just kept on playing them anyway. I think from a combination of multiple factors, such as they were addictive, and I just used it as a form of escapism from my real life. I just felt like this really mild undertone of guilt that only grew as the months and years went by as I got older. I just heard like all of these influencers' voices in my head telling me to stop while I played. I just had this voice in my head like saying, you need to stop, you need to stop. But I just kept on playing and I just couldn't help it. So, oh yeah, the guilt had really began to increase as I got older and was still playing these video games. And I remember that the guilt that I got when I played video games was really began to increase in 2024. The guilt that I got from playing video games, like I was just stuck in this negative haze of trying to escape from the real world through the virtual world, but not knowing that it was bad for me. I believe that this is called cognitive dissonance, right? You just believe that something's bad for you, but you keep on doing it, and then it puts you into this negative haze. And I was in that for way too long, right? I was just kind of playing them and forcing myself to enjoy them, but I just knew that they were bad for me, and did did bad things for my mental health. It was just this haze where I felt like I should have enjoyed it, but I just didn't, right? I was, again, just, it felt like I was just forcing myself to be happy and forcing myself to enjoy this thing, but I didn't want to do it. I was addicted to video games because my life was boring, right? I didn't really have much going for me. I had some studies going on, but I just kept on procrastinating, like pretty much every video gamer does, right? My life had slowly began to become more healthier from that point of June of 2022. But even like 6 months down the line, where I was a much healthier person than 6 months prior, my life was still boring, right? I still didn't have much going on for me. I was just kind of going outside, going for walks, and this was, of course, in December, so school had stopped. I didn't really have anything to do. Yeah, I was just kind of listening to podcasts, just roaming around outside, not really having anything to do. And I want to compare this to the present moment where I truly do believe that I have a much more interesting life. Probably not as interesting as it could be, but I'm going to the gym, I have a job, and I'm posting these videos, right? I think that's a much more interesting life compared to then. So I don't need that. I don't need to escape to the fantasy of video games. I don't need that fantasy world to entertain me anymore because I've built a life where I have goals that I'm working towards. I remember that I stopped playing video games when my life began to become interesting, right? I began going to the gym at the end of 2024. I began posting these videos at the beginning of 2025. I got a job at the beginning of 2026, right? All of these factors combined, and the gym was a big one because the last time I played a video game was when I began to get into the gym, which I think is quite profound. I think that shows just how powerful the gym has been in my life. So yeah, all these things going on for me, I don't need to escape to the virtual world to entertain me. And I value my time anyway from having done these things. So I will definitely feel like video games will be a big waste of time if I do play them. So I just stay well away from them now. My life was boring back then in like 2022, 2023, but I honestly believe that my life could have been more interesting, but I just gave into these petty excuses like, oh, I'm too young to go to the gym is scary, right? I'm too young to do that, it doesn't matter. And the reality was that I was too young. Well, yeah, I was too young. There were no negative repercussions of me not doing these things, so I stayed in my comfort zone. So yeah, my life could have been interesting when I was struggling with video games, but it was just too painful for me to go and build that life back then. I've always found that video games have been really addictive for me, right? It's always felt like I've been indulging in this fantasy, in this escape from the world, and I have used it as an escape from the world in the past. It had just made my life feel so easy, right? It had just made my life feel so comfortable that I had this addiction that I could go and escape to, that I didn't have to worry about the outside world, that I could just distract myself and indulge in this fantasy anytime I wanted to. These games that I used to play had also had quite a strong sense of community in them. I'd I'd felt really connected with the other players that I used to play with, and that I'd play with regularly, who I didn't even know in real life. Especially when I didn't really have a social circle in real life, right? That was my social circle. And if that was my only social circle that I had, why wouldn't I feel even more drawn to video games and want to escape to that world? I think a lot of guys can relate to this, and I want to say that it had quite hijacked my male aggression and my drive for progress. Right, that's what video games are designed to do for men specifically. I remember that I just feel depleted of all drive and motivation and effort and will after I'd played a specific game, right? And this was in 2024 when I was a much healthier person, and I was able to look down on that negative emotion. Yeah, I literally didn't have any like motivation or drive for anything else in life when I played video games. Video games were my main like progression in life, right? I felt achieved at the end of the day, even though I didn't even achieve anything in real life. Yeah, I've always found that video games were way too addictive because of all of these factors, and I was actually training my willpower at the time because I was consuming all of this self-help content, and that had been a habit that they had prescribed. But I still couldn't quit even after having developed a good enough willpower to resist certain foods that I was addicted to. I still couldn't quit video games because that's how addictive they were. And I'm gonna repeat this again. I was literally just too young to see a negative consequence. Why would I stop if it didn't even have a negative consequence in my life that was really profound? And I remember back to those gamer days. The gamer days had stopped when I turned 17. So prior to when I was 17, those days were just way too fun. Right? Those days were just full of so much enjoyment and pleasure. Video games was just way too fun of a habit for me. They were challenging, right? I used to figure out ways of how I could get better at the game. I used to play Minecraft with my younger brother and we'd just build things together, right? It was just way too fun of a habit to resist and just give up, especially for a young boy like I was. I remember that I used to be controlled by video games, right? I remember that I used to like wake up at 3 a.m. because there was this event on this game that was only hosted at that time in my time zone. I remember I used to contemplate skipping dinner because there was another event at this time, at the time that I'd usually eat dinner, but I really didn't want to miss it. right? I remember I used to just, my life was just controlled by these games, right? Because I really wanted to progress in them. So I was even willing to sacrifice my real life and my health and integrity in real life just so I could progress in these games. I remember that I used to stay up late at night. I remember that I used to stay up late at night, like watching news about the game and entertaining myself. I remember that after I dropped out of ninth grade, I was just homeschooling. I moved to another school from the original school that I was that supported homeschooling. And I remember that there were like conference calls that we had to attend every week with that school. And I remember that I'd literally just have my PlayStation open on one screen and then that conference call open on the other screen. And I'd just be playing while like kind of listening, but also just pretty much ignoring them. I remember all sorts of examples of this. Like we have a parrot, we have a pet bird, and I had responsibilities to take care of him, but I was still controlled by video games. I had this responsibility of taking care of this pet, but I was willing to neglect that because neglect that for the sake of progressing in video games. I think this just shows how powerful of an addiction it really is. So I've gone 13 months, perhaps even 14 now, without video games. So how did I actually quit? I think the first and biggest one is that I made my life interesting, right? I think we can stereotype most video gamers for having a boring life and quite frankly being lonely in real life. Right? Anyone who has an interesting life does not need video games to entertain their mind. They have goals and desires and they create challenge for themselves in real life, like I have. So yeah, I made my life interesting. The gym was a really big one. Just fill up your day, fill up your schedule with things that actually help you, that you are interested in, so that you don't have time for video games. Another thing I did was tapering. Like when doctors taper you off of a medication, they'll get you doing a smaller and smaller dose each week. That's what I did with video games. I did a smaller and smaller dose each week. I played maybe 15 times a month and then 10 times a month, then 5. And that's when I had eventually quit because I was literally just slowly lowering it down to 0. And this had really dislocated my identity from video games, if that makes sense. Like my identity of being a video gamer was now being broken down to 0, so that I began to believe that I was no longer a video gamer from just deliberately doing the habit less and less over time. My identity now compared to then is that I'm just not a video gamer, right? Like when guests come to my house or I go to guests' house and they play video games, I'm just the guy just sitting there like watching because I don't identify with that habit. My identity back then was that I was a video gamer because I played video games. Right, your identity comes from what you do, and what you do comes from your identity. So so I had to find a way to break that vicious cycle. I was just avoiding the pain of quitting back then. Right now, I identify as a person who can go through pain and adversity and come out the other side with a better reward and in a better place in life. I also began training my willpower, even though I said that I struggled with willpower in regard to video games. I still did manage to resist sometimes some urges to play video games when I did get the urges because I was training my willpower. I remember just getting my favorite chocolate and just sitting it in front of me and staring at it. Just feeling my mouth watering, feeling my dopamine receptors flare up when I was craving it, right? And that had quite helped with resisting video games. But I did do the same thing with video games as well. I just open the menu of the game, sit there and stare at it. What I didn't do was delete the games from my computer or from my phone, right? I kept the games on my phone because I wanted to I wanted to train that I wanted to train my ability to resist them when they were presented in front of me and break my identity from them as well. So I didn't even want to do them. Right? I didn't delete them from my life. I kept them in my life so that I could prove to myself that I wasn't them anymore. I also tapered the intensity of the games that I played, right? I used to play like quite aggressive games and then I slowed it down to more slow paced and peaceful stuff so that I wasn't like hyping up my dopamine receptors so much so that I could get to a safer place to completely quit. So yeah, tapering in volume and tapering in intensity is what I did to quit. And that had broken my identity from being a video gamer along the way. And I've also found that I've never done well with playing video games in moderation, right? I do not believe that video games can be played in moderation because I've tried that before, but it's possible, but it just doesn't really work, right? Because you play a bit and then you just want to play more. I only really believe that you either do it too much or you do it too little. Like, I can compare it to food, right? I do believe that junk food can be eaten in moderation. I don't believe that you should do that, but I have the power to go to like an Indian restaurant, only have like one naan, and that's it. I can discipline myself to go to a restaurant, only have like a few chips, and that's it. Just eating in moderation. Like I said, yeah, yesterday I ate some rice. I ate some risotto. I only had like a light plate of it, right? I didn't eat the whole bowl. That was moderation. There are things that you can moderate in life, but I've found that video games just are not one of them. Especially if you're someone who values their time, right? If you value your time, you're gonna be savoring every minute of every hour. Like, if the rest of your life from video games is productive, you're not gonna want to play video games because you're gonna want to naturally find more ways to be productive in your life. You're not gonna want to waste time, right? So yeah, video games, you can't do them in moderation, and I definitely couldn't as well. You either do it too much or you don't do it at all. I think it's a better place to just not do it at all. Okay, and that's another thing, is that I began valuing my time. I began valuing my time when I began to actually be more productive in life and work towards my goals and desires in life. Because when you value your time, you are gonna naturally eliminate everything that you don't need in your life, like every inessential. Video games is a massive just inessential in my life, right? When I began valuing my time, which I did I think I'd say at the beginning of 2025, end of 2024, when I began going to the gym and posting this content, that's when I really began valuing my time. That's when I began to like stop wasting my time listening to music, stop wasting my time on video games. I just found ways to stop wasting my time on things that did waste my time. So why would I be in the circumstance of playing video games or want to play video games? So yeah, valuing my time had been a big one for me also. I feel like all of these just cooperate with each other, right? Like building an interesting life for yourself, you're gonna value your time naturally. And if you value your time, you're gonna build an interesting life for yourself, right? They all like reciprocate with each other until you eventually get to the point where I am, where I'm just focusing on life solely. Don't even get thoughts about video games.